Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
Lately about the efficacy of debating, right? The Sam Seder 20v1 debate video got me thinking, because I think that was pretty much a home run for Sam Seder. I mean, that Jubilee clip, Jubilee, as sort of evil and sinister as they appear to be as an organization, they have a ton of reach, man, just absurd reach. And that whole sort of like centrist game, you know, like in the middle, or 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats, that seems to work to build a broad audience. And Sam Seder did well enough on that platform that his episode is traveling like far. Like a lot of people are talking about it. People have brought it up to me in conversation. I've seen random people that don't know anything about Sam Seder bring it up and talk about him by name specifically. So it's interesting. And as for like what the broader effect of that particular debate on the discourse is, I don't know. That's a different question, because you had weird things happening where like conservatives, because Sam was sort of like owning these younger kids who looked a little hipsterish, people were thinking that Sam was the conservative who was owning a bunch of woke liberals. So that's pretty funny. What that says about people's ability to engage with and consume debate content, I have no idea. Probably just says mostly that people were sharing it without watching it. But it's making me think about debating a little bit differently, because I've watched debate content over the years and I've enjoyed debate content, and even just the idea of debating, I think, is powerful. And it's certainly good entertainment. But I do wonder, like, to what extent does it cross out of entertainment territory into something that's actually useful? I do think that it can change some people's minds. I think what has happened with the sort of streamer culture of debating that has convinced a lot of people, myself included, that it's not that useful of a thing is it creates this team sport element that's like way more pronounced than it ever was before. So if you had like Noam Chomsky and William F. Buckley, both of those guys had prospective followings, but not to the extent that like they couldn't have a debate like this without their following, you know what I mean, directly engaging each other in combat in the streets. In other words, like these streamers have such rabid followings that you essentially get these clashes between fan bases, and then you also get the impression of like nothing was gained here, nothing was learned, nothing was earned. It's more akin to warfare than it is to some kind of like exchange of ideas where the broader public grows from it. And while I do think that there's some catharsis to be had, I think toxic figures like Destiny and Vosh, the one service that they have provided over the years that I think is actually very valuable is like, you know, engaging in these like sort of vicious debates with people who view themselves to be quite vicious, and just really tearing into them and tearing down these like fake masculine, fake dominant worldviews like white supremacy and misogyny, and being good enough at debates to attack that kind of ideology head on and humiliate it and embarrass it. And so I think that over the years, people like Vosh and Destiny, and there's others, have done a good job with that. But I ask myself, you know, to what end? To what end? I don't think we have successfully beat back those ideas at all. And I've seen a fair amount of debates similar to this one with Sam Seder, where, you know, the person on the left is the one more equipped with information, and the person on the right is more equipped with a sort of, with a worldview that what it does is it confuses the conversation and causes people to get discombobulated in what they're arguing. Because that you saw it happen in the Sam Seder debate, where He's arguing with this Christian nationalist guy. And so what started as a claim about policy, like, Trump's policies don't benefit you unless you're a Christian nationalist, essentially was his point. This guy all of a sudden starts arguing in favor of Christian nationalism. And so when you're not so much arguing on facts, but you're more taking this like archaic philosophical approach and trying to use that to reconstruct a worldview right in front of the camera, right in front of our eyes, it can be very just disconcerting and confusing. And so I do think the right has gained a decent amount of ground because of that tactic. But for the most part, when you're well equipped with information, you can pretty easily dismantle their points. And the question is like, has that really helped? How many people have been convinced, and to what extent are we convincing people with facts and information? Because I think the problem with the debate is that you're really just it's rhetorical. You know what I mean? It's an exchange of rhetorical tactics, and the person who is better versed on how to sort of outwit a person rhetorically is probably going to be the person who comes out on top, unless, they get fully backed into a corner or they just have nothing. So it's more about how well can you weaponize the talking points and the information that you have. And not only does Sam Seder also, that also applies to him, but that's also the way the show is set up. That show in particular is like you set out a certain talking point and then everybody tries to refute it. And again, Sam did that in a way that was smart, that attempted to focus people more on policy rather than the weird culture war stuff. But the problem is that the culture war stuff has taken over in general. And as much as we might have wanted to make these debates about facts and information and how to get your information from good sources and things like that, at the end of the day, we're still just inundated with culture war bullshit, and that is what dominates the conversation every time. The question, I guess, is can debates be useful in that environment? An environment that is just dominated by culture war, gender war, race war, style, content, and talking points, without there being a real, like, the ideological underpinning of some of these ideas is so archaic that it just essentially serves as content. But then people are able to launder these incredibly noxious ideas like Christian nationalism through this debate format. And it almost seems like they're able to do that better than, somebody on the moderate left is able to convey facts and information through the same format. It's like the cartoonish and exaggerative worldview gains more ground in the context of a content debate than, real information and like a well-rounded worldview. So I don't know. I have some more thoughts on it, but I'm curious what you think about that.
I think debates do serve a purpose or can be useful. Maybe not in the way you would think they would, based on, the definition of a debate or what it is, like, because that is the cliche thing, right? That nobody ever is debating someone and is won over, right? Debates only serve to further entrench people on their side, make them more passionate and angry about it, but never really convince anyone. But debates really aren't for the debaters, they're for the audience. And there are cases, I'm sure, where people are on the fence and they watch a debate and can be won over, or maybe, some rare cases where someone is just persuaded by the debate. But that is the exception, not the rule, right? But I think it's a really good tool to learn the other side, right? Watching a debate, you can kind of figure out where the enemy, in quotations, is coming from. You see what they find as a priority, what they think is important and bring up, and what they're passionate about, what they think is relevant to the topic you're talking about. And that can all be very useful. One thing I think that debates do for you, which, you know, is kind of a byproduct of the debate and not something you would normally think about, I guess, until you're in this situation, is like they can scratch an itch. Like if you're on the losing side, like take us right now, the left, in a world where Donald Trump has somehow won again and they're just reigning supreme right now. I mean, they're loud. That crowd is very loud, especially not just the right, but the Trump right. Very loud. They're the, you know, flags on their truck, bumper stickers, t-shirt, hat. They're the merch mob. And so you're hit over the face with it constantly. And it can be really disheartening and make you feel a little crazy sometimes. So when you watch a debate where someone is just like owning a conservative, or especially like a Christian nationalist bigot, watching them get owned can be very cathartic. It can really make you feel like you're not crazy or just shouting into the void. It can give you hope. And hope is so important. That's why they made 42 Star Wars movies about it, right? But I see what you're saying. I 100% agree that it can seem kind of crazy and useless to debate because you bring up facts, actual raw numbers, specific statistics, and it doesn't matter. In the culture war, they just get angry and they don't listen to those statistics, no matter how good they are and how much you think they should be persuasive. Like, very black and white, raw numbers. Like, the fact that you could say Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party right now and the president again, and the Republicans are traditionally what is supposed to be the traditional family values party. Yet he's been married 3 times with multiple public affairs and a very, you know, sexist attitude. He said many things that are on tape, like grab her by the pussy. And yet he's still the leader of the family values party, right? Or, I mean, anything with him, specifically business stuff. You know, they talk about how he's a good businessman, but you bring up the facts that, you know, his businesses have gone bankrupt 6 times. Or some of those, and, you know, he's had multiple casinos that have failed. How do you have a casino that fails if you're a good businessman? It doesn't really make sense. And it's not even just him, obviously. You know what a great example for this is the trans issues in America. Because that's such a hot button issue. It's so polarizing for people, and it's one of the things that Trump leads on and won on is the trans issue. And even if you disagree with trans people, if you don't think that a trans woman is a woman or a trans man is a man, if you're a bigot, I want to be clear about that, but let's say hypothetically that you felt that way, it shouldn't be a huge priority to you when you look at the actual statistics and numbers, right? Because it's less than 1% of the population. How are you going to make big countrywide decisions based on less than 1% of the population? You wouldn't do that with anything else. It's just because they are so passionate and triggered by trans people. And specifically, one of the big things is trans athletes, right? But that's another great example because even the president of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, says there's like, roughly 500,000 college athletes, and 10 of them are trans. 10, not 10%. 10 people are trans. So we're talking about less than 1% of less than 1%. Like, but they still get angry about it because they don't care about facts. They care about feelings, which is so ironic, right? Because they're the facts, not feelings crowd, right? Facts don't care about your feelings, but it's the exact opposite, right? So that can be why debating them can be so difficult, because it just doesn't make any sense and it's so hypocritical. But I think what Democrats need to do is just learn from that. Like, at some point, you just gotta play the game at their level. They didn't learn how to run against Trump 3 times in a row, and it bit the whole country in the ass every time, really. But we have to take that into debates. Like, if you want to win debates like that, not necessarily roll in the mud, but use that. Find those things that trigger them and do their classic fear-mongering. Turn it on them. I don't know what that is necessarily. I'm kind of just thinking of this off the cuff while we're talking about it. But there has to be the same kind of things that treat them, because debates do win from emotion and passion. It's not really about the facts and the statistics, and that is frustrating. But we know that. So rather than just be mad about it, what we need to do is figure out a way to use that against them. Figure out what triggers them that works for our side and use that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because the one thing that I will say about debates in general and the way that the right has gone about debates, when you look at people like Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, and the way that they have sort of like laid the groundwork for the right-wing movement ideologically, they did it by constantly putting themselves in the context of a debate and constantly, doing it very confrontationally. And there's much criticism to be had about the fact that a lot of times what these guys would do is go to college campuses and debate college kids, which is an interesting experiment because college kids are exposed to a lot of information and stuff like that. But it's also kind of a weird, they sort of would angle, there's a lot of debate content out there that like Steven Crowder has done, Ben Shapiro debating college student, Odin's college student, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, there's obviously a disbalance in the way that is set up. They're not going to show as many of the moments where somebody makes a good point against them. But aside from like the editing of the content, I do think that there is something to be said for the fact that they have like just constantly and consistently put this idea, this framework and worldview out there to the point where something that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. This idea, like going back to the Sam Seder video when he's talking to that kid who's talking about religion and Christian nationalism, and he's kind of talking about it from like a philosophical perspective. He's trying to say that philosophically, if you don't believe in God, you have no structure to your belief system, no morality, which is obvious bullshit. But that's not even the first time I've heard that argument. I've heard that argument a bunch of times, actually. That's what Jordan Peterson has made an entire career, bread and butter, off of arguing. And that idea, frankly, to me, makes no fucking sense at all. I think it's a horrible way to look at the world, and it's a complete lack of accounting for the fact that humans have learned all kinds of things about life and morality simply through experience and the nature of the workings of history. Like, that's where I would argue where most morality comes from. And there's maybe some groundwork for that's laid within religion. But this idea that like we need these like ethno-nationalist, which in many ways are not even attached to any actual form of Christianity or anything else, like that's become kind of a mainstream belief system to the point where people who don't even really engage deeply with these ideas, they will kind of absorb this worldview and maybe even espouse it. You know what I mean? Like I think that that type of perspective has been enormously influential because they have presented it in the context of facts instead of feelings. And that's exactly to your point about how, finding things that make the other person upset and lose their composure is one of the best ways to win a debate. That is something that the right wing has utilized very effectively because they will present like a completely alternative set of facts or an erroneous set of facts. I'm reminded of Elon Musk recently tweeting a graphic about how trans people committed a disproportionate amount of sexual violent crimes, which is like just 100% not true, absolutely not true, fully debunked. But it was something that he just shared credulously, with which no doubt thousands to hundreds of thousands of people have just absorbed uncritically. And the main issue that drives me crazy that we have lost ground on is the idea of abortion. The idea that a fetus is a person in any way, shape, or form. The idea that we have ceded that scientific ground to religious zealots and people who want to control women to the point that saying that getting an abortion is killing a person is a framework that so many people have just accepted as true, and they think that they think of the ethical debate as, is it ethical to kill a baby if it's, whatever, going to save the mother's life or blah, blah, blah. And if you have that, if the conversation is happening in that framework, then, obviously you are biasing that against the rights of the mother, which is why it's like, that to emphasize the fact that like in no scientific way and on no scientific grounds is a fetus a person. And I don't know when exactly you would draw that line, but I would say it's probably somewhere around the time that like a brain or like organs are developed. Something that, makes a person work, like makes you able to have thoughts and feelings. Maybe that's around the point where personhood happens, not like when you're a tiny fucking zygote. But by being able to frame things in terms of like a very specific framework, informational framework that is hard to work your way out of, they have controlled the conversation. And I think, the left needs to do that now, because they did that. They laid a ton of groundwork when they were on the back foot on a lot of these issues, including abortion. Abortion was kind of a foregone conclusion in terms of what people believed about it for a long time. And only now are the long-held like understandings about the rights that a woman has in that regard being questioned. And it's because they laid this groundwork and they never stopped. They never backed off and were never apologetic or forgiving or compromising about it, even though they're 100% wrong. So, we got to do the same thing in the reverse order. And if I think if there's any argument for debating with people, publicly debating with people, privately debating with people, it's the fact that the more you put yourself in front of somebody making the clearest argument that you can, the better chance those ideas have of taking hold, is really what I think it comes down to. And while there are many arguments for not arguing with bigots, not debating with people who hold disgusting beliefs, many reasons why a person wouldn't want to put themselves in that position, including that they don't want to debate about their own rights with the person who thinks they should be killed. All of that is valid. But I also think the right wing has made an enormous amount of progress by putting themselves on as many screens as possible, making their version of coherent arguments. And, it's gotten them pretty far. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting all kinds of cool content there, like beats, exclusive podcasts, movie reviews, book reviews. If you like the beats that play in the back of these podcasts, all of that's going to be posted there and more. If you have ideas for stuff that you would like to see as exclusive content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.